I'm going to keep killing them until you shoot me, she said, not looking at her partner. Nick shook his head. His hand trembled so hard, he nearly dropped his gun. Another shot caused him to let out a small whimper of fear. I was the one who brought you back. If I shoot you, you'll, he said in a very small voice. More of the hostages started to wake up from the sounds. Most sat up, trying to move and get away. All were scared and confused about where they were. Another went down, and they all let out muffled screams. Nick finally raised his gun, his face pale, and his finger still not on the trigger. Of the hostages still alive, one stood out. A very small person, barely the size of a child and crying the loudest. Miki's gun moved in their direction. Nick called out her name, tears starting in his eyes. He begged her to just drop her gun, to just listen to him, and for both of them to walk away and figure things out. When she started to tighten her finger, he shouted, and a gunshot went off. Anne-Claire had removed her face from all his memories, but one. Blood started to bloom on her chest and he could see her expression clearly. Her entire face clear for the one and only time. After seeing Miki fully for the first time, I fully understood everything. Why Nick cracked, and why no one would talk about their relationship. She wore a tired but thankful smile. Miki, the immortal daughter of a long-forgotten alchemist and Nick's older sister, was dead before she hit the ground. Her long blonde hair fanned out behind her as it slowly started to become stained with red. Nick's gun dropped to the ground, and a second later, the entire building exploded in a fiery red light. Patterns of wings twisted in that light as massive crystals crashed through the ground. The walls blew outwards, and the ceiling burned away. If Anne-Claire and Abarash hadn't been inside the magic circles, they would have died. Still, the spells couldn't hold everything back. The magic cracked and smashed through under the power around it. Anne-Claire got knocked aside and thrown into darkness for a while. When he got up, the place looked completely destroyed. The batches of crystals were sticking up in random directions. Bits of debris littered the cement floor. Abarash already awake and holding Miki's head in her lap as she sobbed. Somehow, her body had remained untouched. He looked for the remaining hostages, praying they hadn't died after Nick had been forced to kill in order to save them. His eyes landed on clothing that was stuffed with straw, and his heart sank. The corporation had made dummy spells in order to create practice hostages that behaved almost like real humans for a short amount of time so they could help train agents. The faces were the only thing that looked a bit off about them. Miki wasn't killing anyone. She just needed Nick to think she did. He ran on uneven feet, looking for Nick. What he saw caused him to collapse to his knees next to the agent. Nick was on his side, his body covered in cracks and still smoking a little from expelling so much power at once. Anne-Claire reached out to put him on his back, some parts crumbling away from his touch. He pulled his hands back against his chest, fearing that if he touched Nick again, he would be completely destroyed. Those terrible hands were sharp enough to ruin him. He'd stayed away fearing he would be the cause of more harm, and yet felt like he was the cause of all of this. "My little boy," he whispered to himself, not aware of his own voice. Abarash looked up at him, fury in her eyes. She knew Anne-Claire slipped up and put this idea into Miki's head. She needed to place the blame of losing the one she loved on anyone but herself, or Miki. "This is all your damn fault. I told you you would hurt him, and you dragged us all into it," she said, the hardness in her voice fading as she held back sobs. In order to regain control of herself, she took a deep breath and pushed the hair away from Miki's face. She needed to fix this. Miki might be dead, but this wasn't over. "He's still alive. We'll bring her back," she said in a whisper. Through all the grief, Anne-Claire almost got angry at her for being so stupid. She'll just pull something like this again. He can't get hurt, not like this, for a second time. "Oh, so you're the smart one now?" she snapped back. We can bring her back and fix her. She felt guilty being alive before because someone had to die to make it happen. If she didn't remember that, she would be fine. We'll just use him and erase her memory right after. It's simple. He shook his head, not wanting to hear it. He only wanted Nick to get some treatment, but couldn't risk touching him. Abarash, please let her go. He begged, hating to see her like this. You owe me. He flinched. It had been his inability to control his anger that had put the idea in Mickey's head. He would never forgive himself for that. While looking at Nick, he gave in. Utterly defeated, he started to listen to Abarash, knowing it would be the only way to repay her for everything he'd ever done. I can't use his power to replace her. There is nothing in this world worth as much as her. And I know you'll be all huffy about using Nick and won't do it. So, well, let him do it. Give him time to recover and let him. He listened silently, his chest feeling like a black hole. He didn't want Nick to suffer again, not even for another second. But his heart broke so badly that day that he just nodded, ready to go along with whatever Abarash said. For 10 years, they watched Nick's wounds heal over. His memory problems were not of their doing, but worked so well with their plan that they went along with it. Ankar's memories faded, leaving us in the black, empty space. I could start seeing cracks in the spell, showing me that we might not have a lot of time left to talk. Tears ran down my face, and I couldn't make them stop. Wow, you great. This entire time Abarash had planned on sacrificing me in order to get Mickey back. All those kind words were just to make me keep going, to keep working. I might be able to forgive her for something like that, but she planned on hurting Nick, to make him lose another person he loved. That was unforgivable in my eyes. I think she started to care about you. In the endless darkness, the towering monster spoke. He still hadn't returned to what he should look like yet. It almost looked like he felt a bit awkward standing next to someone that started crying. I rubbed my eyes, gathering myself again. From what I could tell, she leaked some information to the hunters in order for them to create a different stone. Abarash wanted Mickey back, but had second thoughts about taking your life. I nearly cried again, thinking about the imperfect stone and knowing Abarash was the reason why it had been made. Horror rolled over thoughts when I thought about the office. Surely, she wouldn't have gained anything from that. Seeing my reaction, the monster shook his head, red eyes leaving streaks of light in the air. I would like to believe the hunters stumbled into a way to attack the office. After all, she would not have risked your life as well as setting the plan further back. That news sounded to be the only good bit of information to come out of this mess. I finally knew the history that had been hidden for so long. But why did Ankar turn on Nick? Wouldn't that be the last thing he wanted after everything that had happened? Why are you doing all of this? If you didn't want her to kill me, then why force Nick to become something else? What are you really using him for? I pressed. The monster glanced over his shoulder. Echoes of a conversation that had turned into a fight came through the darkness. Abarash found out just how much Nick cared about his partner, and demanded their plan go into action. Ankar, who had seen the face Nick made when he protected the office, disagreed. He no longer could make Nick lose another person. They fought, and in the end, he struck her down in order to put forward his own plans. I'll use his power to rewrite this world, one whose sole purpose is that he's happy. Anything that made him suffer in the past is to be removed. You may still be with him after all of this is over, but you won't be the same person, he explained. My face flushed with rage. He would trade this entire world for something like that. Nick might be happy, but what about everyone else? My body shook from just how angry I felt towards him. He doesn't want something like that. I snapped. I would think you would be the only other person that understood. The monster roared back. Nick is suffering and I must fix that. Suffering? You call all of this suffering? For the first time, I let him see my own memories. All the cases we'd been on, and all the times Nick smiled. There had been times where he'd gotten hurt, but he wasn't unhappy. If Ankar went through with his plan, all of these memories would be erased. Every precious moment would be taken away because of his own selfish regrets. I simply couldn't let that happen regardless of how powerless I was. He watched, and something started to happen to his form. It started to shift from the towering black monster to what he really looked like. He never once thought the cases we went on could have so many good moments, even if they were very small, like making Nick wear a stupid hat, or letting him pet a dog in the park when we should have been working. When Ankar finally looked like himself, I stood next to him to watch the last of the fading memories. "You called him Snickerdoodle?" he asked slowly. I felt my face flush in embarrassment. I opened up and let him see everything, only to have him make fun of us. Hiding his mouth behind the back of his hand, I could have sworn I heard him stifle a laugh. "You should have tried braiding his hair again," I said, my voice choking up. "Nick is a stone. My claws are sharp. I would have kept scratching them against him, sharpening them further until there was nothing left." His voice sounded guilty. Reaching out, I took his hand, shocking him. He really expected my hand to start bleeding from the contact. The hands he hated so much weren't rough, but warm. Letting his head drop, he finally accepted his past mistakes. "You're not to blame for a lot of this. Your only mistake was giving up. Nick would have let you braid his hair as many times as it took." More cracks started to appear in the dark. Our time was almost up. Neither of us wanted to leave yet, because the moment the spell stopped, we would return to Ankar about to tear through my body. I didn't know if any of this had changed anything. It might already be too late. His hand gripped mine tighter, causing my head to raise up. "Can you make a promise to me? Could you?" "Braid his hair." I started to cry again. I nodded my head but didn't really want to agree to that promise, since it sounded like he only asked because he wouldn't be able to do so in the future. "I need to keep a promise to my ex-partner," he said in a kinder voice that tore through my heart. Right before the spell broke, Ankar smiled. His expression was the same Miki wore right before her death. I shouted his name, trying to reach out for him. I fell through the light that finally broke through, and back into what we both were doing right before time froze. My fingers were just about to touch Nick's outstretched hand, with Ankar's teeth right over me. Those teeth won out. My stomach crushed painfully, and my body fell back to the ground while a terrible scream came from the red ball of light. The pain didn't last for very long. I became helpless and only able to look up at the monster Ankar had become, my own blood over his mouth. My main regret was that I couldn't reach either of them in time. That day, the person I had been died. The one that was born Audrey Fields and later changed their name to Skylar West died, unable to save their partner. But my eyes opened suddenly. I was on my back, staring up at a blue sky with clouds rolling past. The weather very much the same as the day I had first met Nick. My head felt clear, and my body didn't feel any pain. No sign of the light in the sky or the end of the world being about to happen remained. I sat up too fast, which made me feel dizzy. I needed to find Nick and figure out what the hell just happened. I held a hand to my head, trying to clear it. It didn't feel right. Looking down at my other hand, I almost jumped. It looked too big. These weren't my hands. I felt myself knowing for a fact this wasn't my body. Shaking my head, things started to shift and move around. Why did I doubt I looked like this? I'd always looked like this, hadn't I? A year's worth of memories came flooding in, paralyzing me. They overlapped the time I had spent with Nick. Aside from a few conversations and some minor events, it was mostly the same. But I didn't look the way I remembered. No, I was a different person with a completely different history. I had been kicked out instead of leaving by my own choice in order to help my sister. I hadn't been unable to become a cop due to my gender, but instead due to terrible breathing problems and some serious depression. It took a long time for me to finally figure out what was going on. That person, the one born female and who had transitioned, had died. And they died for me. In order to keep Skylar West alive, Anne-Care used Nick's power to sacrifice the original version of myself, just to keep me alive in some way. The realization sank in, and I couldn't hold back my tears. I liked myself, that version of who I'd been. All the pain and struggles I'd put into it, and all the pride that came with that. The only thing left that proved they ever lived was a year's worth of my own memories. The entire world didn't get changed, only one person. I couldn't sit and dwell on it. I needed to find my partner and find out what else happened. But, most importantly, make sure he was okay. I stood up, feeling a bit too tall. Walking along, I saw that I landed in a field of grass. The clouds were casting shadows, and a soft wind was blowing. There was a dip in the field, and at the bottom, I could see two shapes. I didn't even hesitate to slide down the slope to them. Anne-Care was on his back, hands folded over his chest, and a suit jacket over his face. I didn't want to believe it. Next to him on his knees was the person I wanted to protect the most and failed. His hair down to his shoulders moving in the breeze. I got down next to him, hands on his back to look him over. Nick looked over, face pale and cheeks wet. In his hand was a very worn piece of paper. A drawing he'd done years ago that had been kept in a wallet, proving everything I'd seen to be real. The cruelest thing was that Nick remembered everything now. "I killed you," he whispered, more tears rolling down his face. "No, I'm here. I'm all right," I said to him, sounding pretty much the same as I always had. I quickly crushed him in a hug, finding my partner to be far too small now. Had he always been like this? As we sat, Nick silently sobbed, his frame shaking. Both of us still alive, but I never wanted any of this for him. I let him cry, not wanting to upset him further by talking about anything that happened. "I'm so tired," he said in a small voice, so hoarse I nearly didn't hear him. "It's all right, Nicky. You can take a break. You earned it." I almost hated myself for saying that. I wonder if things would be different if I hadn't given him permission, or if it would have always turned out the way it did. 1 second, I was holding him, then nothing. His empty clothing fell to the ground, leaving me too stunned to react. I couldn't accept it. We'd just found each other again. I couldn't fail him a second time. I frantically looked through his empty shirt, trying to find any clues about what just happened, when my hand brushed against something. Pulling it free, I saw a rough-cut palm-sized ruby. I quickly wrapped both hands around it, pressing it to my chest. My entire body curled over, as if I was trying to protect it from the world. Tears ran down my cheeks as I mentally said his name over and over again. Just as I was about to lose hope, a small pulse came from the stone. My eyes shot open to look it over. Its color was dull, but not completely faded. Nick was still in there. He was just tired, I assured myself. My partner taking a little break like I told him. He would wake back up at some point. A flapping sound made me look over. The drawing almost blew away. I carefully folded it to place inside my pocket and collected Nick's discarded clothing. I couldn't bring Anne-Care with me. I wondered if I should leave the drawing with him, but I ultimately decided to keep it until Nick woke back up, to make sure it didn't get lost and would stay with Nick forever. I walked up the slope, the stone in my pocket, and one hand on it. In the distance, I could see the office building, which looked perfectly fine. Everyone would be worried and wanting an update on what had happened. I wasn't entirely sure of it all myself. Along the way, I came across the reason that Anne-Care lost his life. A girl, barely 16, walking along with very little to cover herself. Long blonde hair like her father. Handsome face like her brother. I walked over to give her the baggy clothing Nick had left behind. She was a bit wary of me, but accepted the help. The shoes didn't fit, so I let her get on my back to bring her back to the office. Her memories had been completely erased. She didn't know why she ended up in a field, or much of anything besides her name. I found Serval pacing outside the office along with a great deal of agents that piled on us for hugs. Miki didn't know what was going on but enjoyed it. We all started to piece together what we knew, but I refused to let anyone see Nick. He stayed safe with me. No one else had died. After Ankar broke through the main fighters, they weren't able to catch up to him. Even in his somewhat crazed state, he'd been careful not to do too much damage. After he reached Nick, the area got covered in a red light. All the damage repaired itself, and anyone who had been hurt got healed. No one was certain if the world had been overwritten, but they all felt as if it didn't. Miki didn't know Nick at all. But still, she was his sister, so she got access to his funds and mansion. After spending some time catching up, she took a sum of money to live off of, and refused the rest. She wanted to travel the world and left the mansion in my name. What was most important is that any cuts she got were not healing like before, showing she wasn't immortal like last time. Still, the corporation wanted to keep an eye on her, so they sent some agents to travel with her, which was fine. A young girl shouldn't travel alone either way. Ankar's memorial was arranged a few weeks afterward. His office was closed, but the outside of it quickly became covered in flowers. He didn't want a public service, thinking there wouldn't be anyone who wanted to attend. After explaining myself, I got permission to go. The Ruby Nick had came with me. I just wanted him to be there. I met with a man barely older than a teenager, with white hair and red eyes. A small grave marker had been set up in a private cemetery for supernatural creatures, but no body to be buried. Only a small vial of ashes would remain there, the rest being claimed by his family for whatever they wanted to do with it. I hoped they put him to rest somewhere and had not butchered him for useful parts. I spoke with the person doing the service. He held a professional air about him until it was over. Then he turned into a huge crybaby, which felt charming in its own way. For some reason, I trusted him right off the bat, and even let him hold Nick's stone for a short while, as he praised my partner for how brave he'd been. He then started to cry again for not being of any help to us. It took me a very long time to find out he was the current Silver King, and he felt incredibly sorry for being useless when it came to alchemy. With Nick having been created by human hands, it meant he couldn't step in or do anything. Before he left, he asked if I could send him a message when Nick woke up. Nick wasn't a creature he ruled over, but he still wanted to meet him. I think a lot of creatures would be jealous if they knew I had the Silver King's number, and that he sometimes sent me cat memes. Abarash took a while to recover from her fight with Ankar. I waited until most of her injuries were gone, and she only had a few days left of bed rest to see her. I walked into her room and her face lit up. I didn't share a lot of what I found out with others. She didn't know I become aware of her plans, or why Ankar put her in the clinic. I sat next to her, her hand taking mine the moment it was within reach. "I was so worried about you. Any word on Nick?" she asked. I didn't know why she even asked about him. She'd gotten what she wanted in the end. "I know about Miki, CYZ. I told her, not looking her in the eyes. She pulled her hand away, face falling and almost looking guilty. Ankar would never have told me any of what I found out. If it wasn't for Mage, her secret would have died with him. "Are you going to be with her again?" I asked. She made a face, knowing how young Miki looked now. Ankar may have done that to spite her a little. "Ugh, no. I just wanted her to be alive and happy. That's all. She doesn't need me. I don't know if she ever did." She trailed off and looked over at the curtains moving in the breeze. Her hand found mine again. I met her eyes, heart beating and chest aching. "We could still," she offered. "I mean, you still love me, right?" I hated to admit that I did. I would always love her. She could put a knife in my chest and I wouldn't stop feeling the way I did. Leaning over, I placed a kiss on her forehead. "This is the last time I'm ever going to speak with you." That answer wasn't what she expected to hear. Tears started to fall from her eyes, and I slipped my hand from hers. She had achieved her goal. Mickey alive and happy, but she didn't have anything else. No partner, no lover, and no ex-partner that still respected her. I left her room, almost regretting my decision when I started to hear her cry. For a while, I was worried about Mage. I hadn't seen him after the fight, and no one else had either. Soon, he came crashing down in my bed after I moved into the mansion. The attack Ankare landed left a clear scar down his face. I scolded him for disappearing for so long, then forgave him. He soon became the only other person I allowed to be near Nick. For the first few weeks, he did nothing but curl up in a ball in front of the stone and cry. It got to the point I needed to keep going into the room to drag him out. Nick wouldn't want him that upset for his sake, and he shouldn't have to hear Mage crying when he's just trying to rest. One night in the middle of summer, Mage crawled on my lap, a bundle of papers in his hands. I didn't think I would learn much more about my sleeping partner, but Mage had been holding back. I've translated and rewritten Alabaster's Diary. I didn't know if you should read this, but it might clear up things about Mickey. It ends the last few days, if not hours before his death, so it may be hard to read. Mage admitted, handing over the papers. I almost didn't read them for that reason alone. But Mage didn't want to be the only person with this burden, so I found the first page and started to read. The feathered creature curled himself tightly in my lap, looking distraught about what occurred in the catacombs. I stroked his feathers, trying to comfort him as I read. Alchemy needs sacrifice. That is a fact I'd forgotten in my grief before I committed such grave sins that I do not believe I can ever be forgiven for. At first glance, it may not appear you have given up anything when you are working with stones. Even unfinished ones hold powers most men could never even dream of. When I was much younger, I had used an unfinished stone in order for my body to stop aging. I kept going on through the years, and at first glance, I paid no cost. My mind had always been set at 100 years. I may have already lived for over 500, but I do not remember the start of it. Only 100 years back. My childhood is lost. Memories of friends and family are gone to the darkness. As I moved through life, I reflected on how I could still die. I needed to ensure my legacy lived on in some way. I found a wife who died after our first child was born due to an illness I couldn't predict or cure. Our daughter appeared healthy as a baby. All thoughts of a legacy were forgotten as I raised her the best I could. However, I was blind to her suffering. The same illness as her mother took her far too soon, and she made me swear not to bring her back knowing what the cost would be. She also knew what the cure would cost, and hid her condition in fear. I broke that promise to her. My mind had gone mad as I spent year after year creating a space to conduct my research into creating a perfect stone. I left life above ground in search of something almost impossible. For a short while, it appeared to be going well. I could create a stone, but when I attempted to use it on my daughter's preserved body, they cracked. Over and over again, I added more and more levels, digging deeper in the ground as I created more stones that failed to bring her back. Finally, my mind and body gave out. I needed to rest, unable to leave my bed for an unknowable amount of time. Before I collapsed, I created 2 stones. I did not have the chance to use them and let them roam free along the bottom floor. I'd truly forgotten about them while I rested. When my body finally let me, I got up to try and start my research once again. While organizing my books, I found something off. They'd been moved recently. The tracks in the dust proved that. I also missed a box of chalk. I walked through the bottom floor, finding small, childlike drawings in the corner of the rooms. More things had been moved around, causing me to wonder if I had truly gone mad. Somehow, I stumbled on a small area almost carved into the wall with damaged desks set out in front. Stolen blankets were set up in the space, big enough for a child to sleep in. More blankets were on the floor as if a second child was taking the more uncomfortable spot in order to watch over the first. A few days of searching turned up who I'd forgotten, a pair of stone in human forms. They, of course, were frightened of me, but I eventually got them to come closer. My body still weak, and I was unable to keep reaching for my goal until I recovered. During that time, I studied them, watching the strange behaviors they had learned on their own. One was a silent but thoughtful child. The other was very loud and enjoyed talking. They both learned how to read on their own and loved any mention of the strange animals that lived above ground they found in my notes. Soon, I started making new journals for them to read while resting in bed. It slowly turned into just telling them what the world above was like, then to creating fanciful stories at their bedtime. Our days passed by like that as I started to get stronger. I didn't want to risk using them yet and cracking the pair. My biggest mistake came when I couldn't find them one day. The only room I could not bear to look inside where they ended up. They found their sister preserved in a glass coffin, the reason why they'd been created. Being children, they asked about it, and I foolishly answered. Those words set in motion an outcome I equally desired and never wanted. After they saw her, the boys became a bit more withdrawn. If I'd been a better person, I would have noticed the signs. Again, they went missing. I now knew their hiding spot, or maybe they just wanted to see the sister they had never met. I entered the room to see the coffin open and my daughter resting on the floor. Only one stone sat with her, eyes blank. I ran over to them, dreading that it was too late to save her body. I took her into my arms, finding her warm and alive. My mind almost broke. I questioned the stone where the other went, and how they'd managed to do this, and he didn't know who I'd been talking about. It all came crashing down. All those sins I committed. Every stone that cracked under the weight of an impossible wish. Alchemy requires an equivalent exchange. The stones in the shape of a child had given their creator everything he needed to make them become the proper sacrifice without realizing it. I never saw them in the right light. I never loved them like the children they were. The pair of stones succeeded where I had failed, because they traded something of equal value. A sibling for a sibling. I held my daughter and a son that given up so much for a useless father, and wept for the first time in years. My sickness grew worse. My daughter woke up, knowing what I'd done. I had broken the promise I made to her. She left, rightfully angry enough to destroy anything I learned in those years, so nothing like this happened again. She refused to be in the same room as her father. I stayed confined to my bedroom, with only the small stone coming inside. He often slept on the floor at my bedside, an old habit he hadn't broken. He did not remember the other stone, but still slept near as if to protect the brother who was no longer there. My daughter has almost gotten rid of everything I've written down that related to the stone's creation. I know she is going to take my life. I'll gladly give it to her. My only regret is that I could not bring this child into the sun. As I've been writing this, he's found his way to my lap. His hair is tied back in a braid I did a few hours ago, a task his missing brother used to do before the job landed in my hands. I've yet to name him. My skills are lacking. I let him draw with ink while I wrote, and decided to ask him what name he would like. After thinking, he stated he read the name Nicholas and wanted to use that. I was taken aback for a moment, then leaned in to tell him a secret, that my name was once Nicola, but I changed it to Alabaster to make me more mysterious. He laughed at my reasoning, happy we shared the secret. I do not have enough time with him. Shortly, perhaps tonight, Miki shall end my life. If she reads this, I only ask one thing of her. Let Nicholas live. Bring him to the light so he can make friends and smile. She may not be able to see his face from the guilt of what I've done, but she should not punish him. He loves her. No matter what happens, he'll always love her. I realized far too late just how much I loved him as well. If anything comes of my life, then please Let it be my children's happiness. Mui. Ming. Mage silently cried when I put the papers down. The friend he cared about so much became blind from love and wanting to see his daughter again. He'd created so many stones and discarded them, not aware they were living, breathing children. I didn't want to fault Miki for ending his life, but I wished Nick hadn't lost a father that cared about him so much. She then abandoned the person who brought her back, leaving a child to wander alone, lost for so many years. When they found each other again, he forgave her for everything and loved her to the point it nearly killed him when she forced his hand to end her life. Whatever I felt about her didn't matter. Miki was dead. The person alive now only looked like her, but wasn't the person Nick knew. I didn't know how he would deal with her when he woke up. I got Mage to bed, glad to have him in the mansion with me. I went into Nick's room and placed the papers next to him. I sat with him that night, looking out to the cloudless, starry sky, thinking back to everything I had learned. I found a good spot to put him, in the sun, looking out over the lawn where the dogs played. A breeze came in from the open window. I moved his spiders into the room so he could keep an eye on them too. My partner had been resting for a while, and his color kept getting better every day. I don't know when he'll wake up. It could be today, or a year from now. Whenever it is, he'll have people to welcome him, a family that loves him, and friends that care. I know he'll wake up. I do have a promise to keep, after all.